So, the OnePlus 8T. Now, I've had about a week to test it out, and take a look at the phone, but I've also already done a full unboxing and a first impressions video. Now, if you want to take a look at that video, I'll put a link to that in the description below. So let's very quickly go through the specs of the OnePlus 8T. Now, there are actually two variants. There is one that is Lunar Silver color, and this one which is Aquamarine Green. Now, both of these variants come with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chip. They both have a beautiful Full HD AMOLED screen, which also supports HDR10 by the way, and it is one of the best screens I've ever encountered on a phone, but we'll talk more about that later. Now, where the two variants differ is basically the RAM and the storage, alright? So the Lunar Silver version has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, and this one, what they call the Aquamarine Green, comes with 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. Now, the screen, like I said, it's one of the best screens I've ever encountered on any phone. The colors are really vibrant without being oversaturated, and it has a refresh rate of 120Hz. Now, it is a dream to use, even like normal apps, just surfing, it's really nice. Playing games, of course, is amazing. I love that, and I don't usually play a lot of games on my phone, but of course, when I test out the phone, I'm going to install some games and play, and I really enjoyed it. It was so smooth. And even like just a year ago in my Samsung Note 10 Plus, that's still on a 60Hz screen. So the experience on playing games and this is totally different. Now, the screen also supports HDR10. So watching HDR movies or shows on this phone, again, really, really good. And that is actually more what I use my phones a lot more than in games. Is really media consumption, and it is probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. Now, another thing I like about the screen, although not everyone is going to agree with me, is the fact that number one, it's flat, and number two, it has slightly thicker bezels than your average flagship phone. Now, why do I like that? First of all, let's talk about the curved screen, right? I've had curved screens. My last few phones have all been curved screens, and I've never actually been a fan of it. Now, one thing I realized that number one, palm rejection doesn't always work well. Number two, a lot of times, like when I'm holding my phone and I'm watching a show, a lot of times the edges, because it's curved, I tend to lose that little bit, and I know it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but the more you watch it, the more it bothers me. But with the OnePlus 8T, because it's a flat screen and because you have a little bit of bezel, it's much easier to handle. I still have not got a single accidental touch. And not only that, because of that bezel, I find one-hand usage perfect. Now, the screen also has an in-screen fingerprint sensor, and again, really good, very snappy. I didn't have any issues registering my fingerprint, and every time I wanted to unlock the phone, it was really snappy. Now, other controls on the phone, you've got your volume controls on the left and your power button on the right, and it may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but it is for me, because again, I have the Samsung Note 10 Plus, and I actually like to have the sort of like a book case, with a front flip as well, only because I'm really clumsy. But the problem with the Samsung Note 10 Plus is that the volume button and the power button is on the left. So when I close my case, I can't get to the power button without uncovering my phone. And just above the power button, you have sort of like a toggle switch that just switches between your audio being on to vibration only and totally silent. Now, most Android phones have not had this feature for years. It's usually software based now. You just kind of toggle it on and off from the notifications bar, but they still have it, and that's interesting. It's neither good nor bad, I think. The only other phone that I think has still kept to this sort of switch is the iPhone. Now, of course, it has a selfie camera, but it's like sort of a punch hole as usual, but it's on the left, not in the center, and I kind of prefer that. I'm still not a fan of this sort of punch hole cameras, but again, like I said before, it's so common now that I've kind of gotten used to it. Now, in terms of battery, it's got a 4500 mAh battery, or I should say batteries, because instead of having a single 4500 mAh battery, it's actually got two batteries, so it's split. I'm not sure if it's even, but yeah, it's basically split into two. Now, a big reason for this is so that it supports OnePlus watt charge, which is basically 65 watt charge, which is incredible. You can get from like 0 to 100% in about 39 minutes. That's insane. Now, of course, a lot of you might be thinking like, there are some concerns with like heat, and then of course concerns with like the lifespan of the battery, because the more you charge it, the faster you charge it, it degrades the battery faster. I don't quite have an answer for that yet. I've only had the phone for about a week, so I can't say for sure whether it really affects it. But in terms of heat, Now, when I charged it, I held on to it. Even when I'm playing games and all that, I charged it while I was playing games. I didn't notice it getting overly hot. It got a bit warm, but nothing that I would say that would worry me. It was totally fine, and it does have a very special vapor chamber cooling. I don't know what exactly it is, but it's probably the sort that you get in more gaming phones. And still, OnePlus have stuck to their guns and not include wireless charge. All right, now it's not a big deal for me. I don't like wireless charging, if I were to be totally honest, so it's not a big deal for me. But if it is for you, do take note, they still don't have it. Now, of course, the big question here, with a 4500 milliamp battery, how long does the phone last? Now, it's rated for about 5 hours or 6 hours of on-screen time. And well, yeah, I would say that's about accurate. But for me, in terms of my own real usage, just using it for, like I said, content consumption, playing a bit of games, surfing the internet, it lasted me easily about a day and a half. Now, let's talk about the camera module, all right? Now, if you know all the other OnePlus phones, the predecessors of this phone, the modules have always been right in the center. This time around, they've gone with what I would say is the more common kind of design for the flagship phones nowadays. So it's always here and it's always got a big module. Now, it's a quad camera setup, which is true. However, my understanding is that the lenses or the cameras are pretty much the same as the previous OnePlus phones, apart from the ultra-wide. So again, it's got a 48 megapixel main camera, a 16 megapixel ultra-wide, a 5 megapixel macro lens, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now, one thing I find weird though is that it has a dual LED flash system, which I haven't seen on the phone in a long time. And I'm just guessing here, I'm not quite sure, but I think the only reason why they have that is so that they could fill up this module and not have like a big gap in the center. But of course, more importantly, how good is the camera? And I would give it, I think, a strong B+. Now, this camera module, I would say excels with good daylight, all right, or with good lighting. Now, during the day, a lot of the pictures I took, I was really impressed with. The colors are really good. One thing I like is that they don't oversaturate a lot of the colors. Like if you were to take a picture of a landscape, a lot of the flagship phones, they tend to overdo it with the green to sort of make the grass look really nice. And it kind of looks nice and stylized, but it's not exactly natural. You get very natural pictures with this, which I really like. Now, the selfie camera sort of blew me away, actually. I was really surprised. It's a lot better than I expected it to be. And just like the main cameras at the back, it's got really good colors without being oversaturated. And it also didn't overdo that whole beautifying effect that you normally get on the selfie cameras. Now, video as well, I would say not bad. It records up to 4K at 60 frames per second, really good. The image stabilization is quite good as well, as long as you take it during the day. Which brings me to its weakest point. And this applies to all of the cameras, to the selfie camera as well. It really struggles in low light conditions. Now, of course, it has a night mode, and sometimes, yeah, you can kind of take good night mode pictures, but it only, in my opinion, it only takes a good night mode picture as long as you still have some sort of light source somewhere. Now, if you take a picture somewhere where there is completely no light source, well, it falls far behind from some of the other flagship cameras, in my opinion at least. Funny thing though, this camera's sort of inability to take in as much light as some of the other flagship cameras sort of works well in certain scenarios. Now, I actually went for sort of like a wine tasting session some time back, and I brought the phone along with me. And I took some pictures and compared the OnePlus 8T with my Samsung Note 10 Plus. And of course, the Samsung Note 10 Plus took some really bright photos in really dark conditions, which really, it was really impressive. However, in terms of accuracy to what you're seeing compared to the photo, actually the OnePlus 8T did a much better job. It sort of managed to maintain the ambience, of the restaurant that we were at. Whereas the Samsung Note 10 Plus, because of how it picks up the night mode, it was very bright, but the colors were a little bit faded. But like I said, all in all, I would give it a very strong B+. I actually do like the camera. It's really good in certain situations. You just have to sort of get used to the camera, sort of know its strengths and weaknesses, and then from there, you can take some really, really nice shots. And by the way, I have been taking pictures with the OnePlus 8T and posting them on our Instagram channel. So if you do want to check that out and as well find out what other products we are going to review in the future. Do remember to follow us on Instagram. So let's talk about the price. And like I said earlier in the video, there are two variants, all right? The Lunar Silver one, which comes with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, and this Aquamarine Green that has 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. Now the Lunar Silver variant comes in at about 899 Singapore dollars, and the Aquamarine Green comes in at 1099 Singapore dollars. So the big question here, should you buy this phone and would I recommend it? Well, it kind of depends on a couple of things. One is obviously what your priorities are, and secondly, also kind of where you are. But of course, I'm here in Singapore, so I'm gonna speak mostly about the situation here in Singapore. So I would say the closest competitor to this phone in specs, at least in my opinion, would be the Samsung S20 FE. Now, it has the same chipset, Snapdragon 865. RAM-wise, it's 6GB, and for storage, you can either get it in 128 or 256GB. So in both variants, the Samsung S20 FE is about $100 more. So what I would say is, if you're really about the experience of the phone, you know, and you're all about the smoothness of the screen and watching movies and all that, I would actually recommend the OnePlus 80 over the Samsung S20 FE. But yeah, I mean, at $100 less, it is not $100 worse. Alright, so that about wraps up my review of the OnePlus 80. Now, if you like this video, you know what to do, and I would love it if you would subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive notifications on our next video. I'm JP, and I'll see you real soon.